Good morning, colleagues, students and guests. Welcome to our 8th talk in our lecture series, in this case by Kate Otten. I'm Ludwig Hansen, and together with Kike Duurman, we oversee the honours program here at the School of Architecture and Planning at WITS, of which this lecture series forms part. The selection of speakers to date have not only spoken to their projects and the impact on our built environment, but have demonstrated clear design approaches and problem-solving methodologies. The understanding of the processes towards achieving design excellence has been insightful, inspirational, and instructive to our students and our peers alike. It is in problem-solving that our future architecture and design will find its role. And I think exposing our students to these established practitioners provides them insights as how to ensure lifelong learning and in their chosen field of study. Before I introduce Kate, some announcements. Please also ensure that your cameras are turned off and your microphones are muted. The lecture series is also recorded and will be published again towards the end of the year. It is also accredited with SACAP CPD points, and on the screen is displayed the link to the form confirming your attendance. And this information will also be displayed at the end of the lecture, and registration is open until 12 o'clock. Kate is probably one of our most distinguished South African architects, with an incredible portfolio of architecture, exhibition, and creative ideas. She studied architecture at the University of the Witwatersrand, graduating in 1987. After working for a number of other practices, Kate established her own firm in 1989, just 1 year after graduating, and her work has received numerous awards and has been widely published both locally and internationally. Her body of work is diverse in scale and type, including a variety of residential and commercial projects, as well as public and community buildings, such as therapy centers, historical restorations, and museums. Through the work of her practice and personally through her activity in architectural education and through bodies such as the Gauteng Institute of Architecture, GIFA, and now as the president of the South African Institute of Architects, Kate has made a valuable contribution to South African architecture, practice, and discourse. And it's with a great sense of gratitude and thanks to Kate for sharing with us at WITS some of your insights, and we hereby hand over to you. Thanks, Kate.
All right, now I'm going to go to share screen, and you are on PowerPoint.
But why do I not? It must start at the beginning. Okay, there, yeah. Okay. And now I just click.
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It seems very strange to be talking to a screen and assuming there are a whole bunch of people behind it. And welcome, and thank you, Ludwig, for inviting me, and not only to be part of the lecture series, but also to be in his studio to kind of...
It's not on screen, it's just a display show. Or display...
Luckily, we have attendance here. Am I on voice? Can people hear me?
I think so.
There.
Sorry.
Okay, there we go. Thanks.
Jumping. Will it stop? Hi, can you see the slide and me?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Kate.
You don't need to see me. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Gosh, okay. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I was just saying thank you to Ludwig for inviting me to be part of the series, and also for allowing me to be in his studio to assist with me with my, difficulties with the digital world. So today I will be presenting only 3 projects But even though it's just 3, there will be many slides, and I think potentially quite intense. So the presentation is being recorded, so no need to take notes. I think if you just kind of sit back and enjoy, that would be great. So the first project I'm going to show you is the Law on Keys project, which is a building situated in Rosebank in Johannesburg. And the presentation that I'm going to be giving you is almost verbatim what I gave to the World Architecture Festival, or we gave to the World Architecture Festival. And so, yes, I think it's quite interesting that I can now share that with a local audience. Loving the tactile and sensory change of season all around me. So worth it, Renee. To work in this glorious space is a privilege. Can't believe that this splendor is the new normal. Just too fabulous. Thanks again. These are some of the text messages we have received from our client, a repeat client who approached us to design a new office for their rapidly growing law practice, a practice that seeks justice for its clients, many of whom are families whose children have become severely disabled as a result of poor quality medical care. Given the sensitive nature of the work, both client and staff require a nurturing environment to support them through what can often be a long and adversarial process. Our response is a design that seeks to re-script the idea of office, to transform a traditional, formal, masculine law office into a space that is uplifting, inspiring, and humane. To achieve this, we have placed people at the center of our focus. Instead of designing a beautiful envelope with generic floor plates into which people are arranged to fit, we have crafted spaces to suit and fit the people. The building is designed around how people will use and experience it. It sets the right tone for clients and opposing counsel, simultaneously being welcoming and inclusive. Both clients and staff feel valued and comfortable, assured that their needs are being met. Through a process of study, interview, and observation, we have understood what each person does and what they need to perform their tasks. Each space has been designed specifically for its purpose, with a particular emphasis on sensory responses, evoked by color, touch, acoustics, warmth, and light. These tailor-made spaces are then laid out in ideal relation to each other, mindful of functional requirements like privacy, security, and hierarchy, but mindful also of how these spatial relationships might feel. The volumes have been linked through landscape, a connection to nature enhancing people's sense of well-being. The landscape also ensures that each person has direct natural light, ventilation, and access to views. The form and scale of the building responds to its neighbours and the surrounding environs. The site is located in the formerly residential suburb of Rosebank, positioned between 2 major busy arterial routes and midway between Johannesburg's old city centre and the Sandton business node. Access to the site is off Keys Avenue, home to a number of art galleries and urban artworks. It has been reinvented as the Keys Art Mile. Rosebank itself is developing into an inclusive, walkable urban centre with a distinct character. Unlike the high walls and electric fences that often greet visitors in security-conscious Johannesburg, Law on Keys is public-facing and accessed on foot from the street. The public areas of reception, dining, and meeting, as well as the semi-public open-plan office space, all open onto the central and northern courtyards. Visitors pass a sculpted garden with artworks, connecting this building conceptually to the Keys Art Mall. The reception and waiting areas are connected to the central planted courtyard, a pivotal feature in navigating the building. A well-appointed kitchen provides meals for the clients who often come from far away and may have to spend many hours at the office. Both kitchen and dining open up to a courtyard. The library, meeting room and boardroom at first floor level are visible from the double volume reception area below. The boardroom is accessed from the public area, but also has a private door for the legal team. As on the ground floor, the individual offices are glass boxes opening onto a private balcony and contained within a planted green screen. Each floor has its own kitchenette and associated social space, opening directly onto a balcony. Materials used for the private external balcony areas are the same internally, the private spaces seeming to float within a garden, connecting and blurring lines between inside and out. There are no passages, instead pause spaces and comfortable waiting areas, all with far and near views of nature. The library, boardroom and meeting room are formal, quiet and unfussy, with rich detailing and materials. The artworks and bespoke interiors, all by local South African artists and craftspeople, have been commissioned and curated specifically to suit each area. Outdoor terraces are designed as garden rooms for entertainment, relaxation and social events, surrounded by planted roofs that offer relief and softness. Entered past the PA's office and waiting area, the senior partner's private suite opens onto a covered deck surrounded by a planted screen and planted roof terrace. The outdoor rooms, whether a typically South African barbecue area or an outdoor lounge with fireplace for winter, facilitate alternative meeting areas without adding to the bulk. The waiting area, PA's office, and partner's suite is not only a private office, but also a meeting place for highly confidential and complex negotiations. This section shows how the building is integrated with the neighborhood street and simultaneously has a presence on the main arterial. Spaces are one room deep, allowing for sun penetration and natural lighting to all spaces. Invisible to users or neighbors, photovoltaic panels on the rooftop provide 65% of the overall power requirements. Doors and windows open into the green lungs, facilitating natural and cross ventilation. Near views enable communication and visually connect colleagues. Far views connecting people with their contexts in the city beyond. From a dry Highveld mining town, Johannesburg has been planted into a large man-made forest by its inhabitants. In reference to this man-made forest phenomenon, the idea of fabricating landscapes has been developed as a key concept. There are three types. Type 1 is a 3-story planted green screen that wraps around the glass office boxes, filtering the west sun and visually screening the busy arterial road. Rainwater is collected and used to irrigate this and the other planting systems. Cutouts in the mesh frame views of the city and of the rising and setting sun. Over time, the screen will become a centered landscape containing the individual offices. While the living green screen grows, the west facade is shaded by 100-year-old plane trees. Sadly, these trees will be chopped down when the road is widened as part of the urban development framework. Type 2 of the fabricated landscapes is a lush green carpet with seasonal splashes of orange and white flowers that cover both wall and floor of the central courtyard. Windows and skylights allow light, ventilation, and views. This courtyard is intensely visible, hence our decision to ensure it is green all year round. Type 3 of the fabricated landscapes comprises a variety of planted roof terraces and external courtyards. They are planted with indigenous veld grasses and aloes, changing colour with the seasons, from dry yellows and reds in winter, bursting into colour in spring when the wildflowers bloom and the grasses turn green. Summer rainfall keeps the soil moist, the resultant coof radiating via the slab to the spaces below. Winter sun heats the dry soil, thus creating warmth that is radiated downwards. From how the building is set in its urban context, to how the visitor experiences the public spaces, and on to the intimacy of a lawyer's private office, people have been placed centre stage, thus creating what we believe is the new normal. So interestingly, that was said 2 years ago. And what's interesting to note is that apart from the level 5 lockdown period, this office has been fully operational during the pandemic. The library has become the new Zoom courtroom, and it is in session. The next project I will show you is the BITS Rural Facility, which is situated near Bushbuck Ridge in Limpopo Province. Our introduction to this project was a comprehensive framework document and this drawing amongst many others that accompanied it, all prepared by Ludwig Hansen architects and urban designers. The first of many visits to site to see the existing facilities followed, and so began our now 9-year relationship with Wits Rural Facility. The Wits University Rural Campus is situated some 480 kilometers from the Johannesburg campus, bordering on a natural nature reserve, the Kruger National Park. This campus provides an internationally recognized alternative teaching platform for in situ research into indigenous fauna and flora, conservation, and socio-economic policy and practice for rural communities. Researchers gain first-hand training and experience of working with rural communities. In turn, the communities become the participants in developing the various research programs, interventions, and training. Our brief was to upgrade and expand this unique offering. In this project, the natural environment is the heritage resource, with key design considerations being to respect and regenerate this resource. To limit impact on the environment, the expanded facility was located on previously disturbed ground within the 350-hectare site. This area was carefully surveyed and measured, and all existing significant trees positioned and identified, as well as existing buildings. Where possible, existing buildings were adapted, existing dirt roads reused, and the area pedestrianized. An architectural language and master plan were developed that enabled a phased implementation as funds permitted. Phase 1 construction being the conference, seminar, and dining facilities to support the Phase 2 construction of a 60-bed accommodation facility. So once again, the Phase 1, just in greater detail, and then Phase 2, again in greater detail. Then some sections and elevations. The buildings were designed as singular spaces linked to covered walkways, thus allowing the various parts to shift to accommodate the terrain and protected trees. This shifting geometry creates a variety of courtyards, gathering spaces, and informal teaching spaces. Referencing local cultural settlement patterns, prominence is given as much to the space between as to the actual built form. The roofs linking the parts respond directly to the topography of the site, rising, falling, and slipping underneath and between the existing tree cover, and even allowing for trees to grow through the buildings. Only 2 trees, neither of them endemic to the area, were removed for construction. Visual corridors to the bushveld are opened up, the site breathes, and wildlife can wander freely between the structures and use the facilities to their full extent if so desired. That's a water buck in the swimming pool. A traditional respect for nature is affirmed. Through a careful use of colour and scale, the buildings recede into the landscape. The facilities are built simply, using local materials, skills and labour, so that the surrounding communities are involved in and benefit from the construction. This same ethos runs through the design and implementation of the interiors, which we were eventually also commissioned to design and install. Economic, social and environmental sustainability were a natural extension of the design. Passive climate control, rainwater collection and sewage purification ensure minimal operational impact. A regenerative environmental management plan was implemented. Previously damaged areas are rehabilitated, thus ensuring the protection of the environment into the future. And the good news is that the more than 60 accommodation units, each with twin beds, bathroom and self-catering facilities, are available at very reasonable cost to BITS staff and students. I'm not sure that many people know that, but it's a wonderful place to that BITS can access. There are also dining facilities, a bar, a new pool house with pizza oven and a view of a waterhole in the distance. What is not to like about alternative educational facilities? I think it's a rare facility and I would recommend that if you can, that you should visit it. So the last project I will show you is the Women's Jail, Living Museum and Offices at Constitution Hill. Constitution Hill is conceived of as a human rights campus. 3 former prisons are located here, and together with the new Constitutional Court, they have become living museum, exhibition and office spaces. Built around 1909, the Women's Jail was considered a fine example of Victorian prison architecture. However, it is better known as a place where women anti-apartheid activists were unjustly imprisoned. Through this project, the building was transformed from a place of oppression and brutality to a place of healing where human dignity is both defended and upheld, housing a living museum, the Commission on Gender Equality, and other human rights commissions. Later additions to the jail were demolished to restore the significance of the original buildings and courtyards, and 2 new office buildings inserted to house the human rights commissions, notably the Commission on Gender Equality. History is revealed through the juxtaposing of modern elements against old. The historic buildings are activated by the new interventions. Prisoners had to obsessively clean this central atrium, but were never allowed to walk through the center of it. Now access to the new offices is via this space. Past commemorative exhibitions that describe the past and interface between public museum and private office space. The new architectural language respects the scale and proportion of the historic fabric, but simultaneously seeks to expose and transform the prison. The new buildings, for example, quite literally jump over the existing perimeter wall, a gesture symbolizing the transformation from a place of confinement to a new expression of freedom and democracy. Ex-prisoners speak emotively about the sky as an element over which prison authorities had no control. Sky is the image used to pattern the screens that shield the sun and mediate users' visual privacy. The rusted color of the screens references the old red brick walls. The architectural interventions seek to convey the cultural significance of the place and provide an eloquent platform for the voices of those who in previous decades were silenced. architecture becomes a prompt for renewal, part of the imagining of a different future. So more recently, let me read this. It is a tradition that the incoming president of the Institute of South African Architects holds their inauguration in one of their buildings. Given my hope for change and transformation of our community of architects, the women's jail seemed an obvious choice. The contemporary architectural interventions are not only an important example of the work of my practice, they are also an offering on the role of architecture in a democratic South Africa. The video clip that follows, which was the introduction to my inauguration event, early August, suggests a transformation, an interweaving of paths that through the central atrium space, claiming the space and challenging the historic marginalized movement on the sides. So now we're going to get the video to play. I'm not sure how to do that.
Kate, we'll sort you out now. We'll share it.
Okay, no problem.
Is it you? It's coming. Here we go.
It must go right to the beginning. That's not the beginning.
Right. I think she's.
No, you must go to the beginning. Please go to the beginning.
I'm not doing it.
We're trying again. Okay, just bear with us.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the person sharing the video is on mute.
We'll start it again. It's very important. Please start from the beginning. Please pause and start from the beginning. No, let's start from the beginning. It's critical you start from the beginning.
Should we get it again?
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, everybody, but I just really would like you to hear it in its fullness. Can't hear it. Okay, that's cool.
Thank you, Kate.
Pleasure. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So tragically, the beginning of that video doesn't ever seem to want to play nicely. But it was just an extremely, a really wonderful experience to make that video, kind of working with all the people who are involved in it. And I guess also as an architect, just to kind of look at making something in a different medium and how that, you know, translates from what we normally as architects kind of, how we work, how we think, but how to translate that into a completely different way of making something. It was a really wonderful experience. So thank you. That's me, done.
Thanks, Kate, for that. We also attended your inauguration, and I think it was quite a powerful statement in itself. in terms of the video as well. Yeah, I think thanks for that. It's the clarity and urbane nature of the space making speaks of careful crafting. And the making of an architecture and assembly, which is really very instructive and I think insightful, especially the care and sensitivity applied in all cases, be it in an urban environment or in a natural environment. And I think, thank you for that. I'm going to open it up a bit for some queries. I know some of the students are a bit shy, but we'll give it a go.
So, I mean, maybe if I could just sort of talk a bit more. I know that people it's very difficult to ask questions in this forum. But what I've tried to do is exactly what you've just spoken of, Ludwig, which is to kind of show the same care and thoughtfulness that, one can kind of, regardless of the circumstance. So we've been very fortunate in having designed or been engaged with a number of different buildings. And I think that is, so there's not kind of one particular way of doing something. And I think that is, it's important. The kind of, each project is approached as its own and for its own value and what we can bring to that, but also kind of what we can uncover through that. So I often talk of a journey that we like to go on with our clients. And I think that's very important because one can discover a whole lot, if you like, together. If there's a kind of communication and a discovery that goes, an investigation, a research. And I think that's always important for us when approaching a project, yeah.
Thanks. We've got a query from Jessica.
Hi, thanks Kate for a really good lecture. I think what really struck me about the projects you selected to speak about was almost, as you say, the journey, but also a story of each building that's so unique to the user and the particular nature of the building and the setting of the building. And it's so well articulated for each project that you spoke to, and each one of them are so unique. I wanted to find out, is developing a strong narrative, do you believe that every building has a narrative to share and a story to tell? And is it something that it feels like it comes inevitably strong from your practice to speak and celebrate that narrative? I'm curious to find out, how strongly do you feel the role of a narrative or story is in designing a building? Because mostly the sentiments lie with the architect, unless you get to share that journey with your client. So yeah, that's my question.
So thank you for that question, Jessica. I think the thing for us that's very important.
Unmute, Kate.
I'm on mute. I'm not on mute.
She's not on mute.
I'm not on mute.
Okay, sorry. I had a senior moment, sorry.
Can happen. So it's kind of in a way what I was saying earlier. And I think that every project has a story, and every project has a kind of an uncovering and a growth that happens with it. So, sometimes it will happen that your first kind of engagement with it is actually how it kind of proceeds. But more often than not, it's something that is, I suppose, iterative. We will kind of visit it in many ways and in a project and with different voices and questioning all the time. So critical to our thinking and to, if you like, making this story is the relationship with the client and with the end user, and kind of putting oneself in their space. And so we don't kind of design architecture with a capital A that kind of, we say it will be like this. There's a very genuine engagement with the process and with, I remember many years ago, early in my practice, I presented a design to a client and they looked a bit disappointed. And I sort of went home thinking, well, why did they not like this and why did they not like that? And it became an incredible lesson for me to be able to hear what other people, how they respond and how they relate to what you do. And almost 100% of the time, I think if one as an architect kind of hears what your client, what your user, what the place is kind of speaking of, I think ultimately you always make better buildings, so that you question and grow with every project and with every process. There is also a process that happens kind of during the making of a building, literally the physical making of it. And I think a certain degree of fluidity within that is also valuable. And I think that, you know, how a building grows over time is also interesting and important, and how it grows through use. And the BAS rural facility has been an amazing process in that regard, because we literally have been involved for 9 years. So there've been sort of, I mean, I speak of 2 phases, but there've probably been 3 or 4, if you include the interiors as one of them. And you know, each time it's kind of, we'll look at what we've done and we will improve it for the next round, or, you know, it's kind of, and when I say we, I mean ourselves and the people who are building it, the people who are using it up at the BAS rural facility. So that's been an amazing process. But I think as architects, well, certainly from our practice, that we engage very deeply. We don't, in fact, it's a frustration that we don't repeat anything, not even a door detail. Yeah, hope that answers it.
Thanks, Kate. Maybe just from, there's someone from Yolani.
Hi, Ludwig. Hi, Kate. Thank you so much
Hi.
for the lecture. Kate, I'd like to find out specifically with regards to the women's prison. You did mention that obviously what you guys did, it explores a lot of different aspects of the New South Africa, and you also tried to express the cultural significance of place and all those things, and also exploring that change and transformation. So I'd like to find out specifically with regards to designing spaces for women, or rather spaces that are inclusive of women. What strategies or what did you see in the women's prison that didn't work, or that maybe we would implement today, respecting the past, but also looking forward? What strategies would we implement today to also be inclusive of women and, you know, everyone, not just women, but inclusive of everyone?
So I think what was very important at the women's jail was that it was a prison, and there was this bizarre contradiction between it being architecturally quite a beautiful structure in and of itself. But if you had an understanding of what goes on in a prison, and specifically what went on in that prison, then that whole thing of needing to expose it and kind of shift and change that. So there were many architectural interventions that we made that kind of, some more obvious than others. So for example, the decision to make everybody need to enter through that central atrium space, through the previous cell blocks, and then into the office buildings, that you then kind of re-scripted how those spaces were experienced. And they did sort of 2 things at the same time, well, many things, but the 2 obvious ones were that in a way you neutralized those spaces by bringing people into them. But at the same time, by experiencing those spaces, which are definitely not neutral, you would recall you do recall the history of the building, and how the one picture that I showed you, so many of the people who are working there now, in fact, were themselves activists and prisoners. In particularly some of the women who are working at the Gender Commission on Gender Equality. And it was really interesting to engage with their process, and how the new building is a delight for them to come to work every day, whereas obviously the prison was quite the reverse. So there were very specific decisions made, like the architecture of the new architecture is very different to the architecture of the historic one, yet they both kind of can work together with things like scale and that kind of thing. So I think a building that is much more open, accessible, the kind of quite obvious way that it jumps out over the wall. I mean, that was sort of questionable for its kind of what's the word, literalness in a way. But I remember a conversation with L.B. Sachs, who's the one of the first Constitutional Court judges, and how, in a way, what that does is it makes it an accessible building. So it's not like, as architects, we've got sort of, we're kind of excluding a community, you know, like if by jumping out, you recognize that the building is there. It's a kind of a main access into the Constitution Hill, and you start to already see that there's something happening here. And it kind of goes over those existing walls that were containing and secrecy that was within that. So I think the building itself is open. And I think that is very important. You know, we often talk about safe spaces in designing structures, particularly for women, or women talk about being scared in spaces because of how they are not designed to accommodate. And I don't think it's just women. I think it's you know, children. It's all kinds of more vulnerable. Don't like to say that, but yes, more vulnerable kind of groups of people, and that we can design buildings that quite overtly are more inviting, accommodating, safe, just by virtue of how they are. The building I showed you in the beginning, the office building, by making the very unusual decision to not have a wall at the front with electric fences and security guards and gates, that you literally can walk from the road into the front door, is an enormously important gesture of a kind of contemporary office building in this city at this point in time. So I think that it's those kinds of considerations that start to create inclusive spaces. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Yolani. I trust that answers you or helps you going forward. Maybe just a question from my side is around collaboration. And you spoke to it in part, but can you maybe expand on the collaboration, maybe on the technical and the making, also engaging with nature? How do you work with these projects in ensuring broader engagement, and what is your preference even in some cases?
I think that it also varies client to client. But one of the most important collaborations for us is with the client, so that, you know, I think that there's often a kind of an idea that a client has, but they don't necessarily have the knowledge that we as architects have. So it's about kind of sharing that and offering ideas, or taking some of the desires and thoughts that they have and working out how you can kind of make more out of that. So that is a very important collaboration with the client. There's sort of different collaborations that happen along the way in each project. So I think that they are quite kind of particular. Perhaps I need to sort of speak to them sort of slightly separately, but there are collaborations, different ones that happen on each project, fundamentally with the client and with the end user. I mean, Constitution Hill, also, there was a whole range of kind of workshops and engagements that were with ex-prisoners, understanding their sentiments and how they had experienced the prison. And it was very interesting because there were things that they remembered that were not physically there anymore, but they'd remembered in certain ways. And that's where it was very interesting to work with Clive Vandenberg and others in creating an exhibition that kind of expressed and explained those things. So, for example, they were no longer the individual cells, the sort of very tight cells that would have divided up those wings. And through workshopping with ex-prisoners and working with artists, an exhibition is created, a permanent exhibition is created that, for example, physically marks out exactly the size of how the space of confinement was, how, what was in that space and what wasn't. So there are also those kinds of collaborations that I think kind of give greater depth and meaning to the work that we do. With respect to how you asked, quite a few kind of collaborations, and there are all kinds of different collaborations. I guess when one does interiors, there are also collaborations there. The planting, etc. I mean, it's very driven by us, I will say, but there's a whole necessary. I mean, one can't realize a project in that involvement or that detail without engaging. So the Wits Rural Project was also very interesting from a point of view of engaging with people up there, with who were then engaging with communities. So the people who live up at Wits Rural Facility, and how they engaged with the community, how we ensured that the people who were there physically building were from the local communities, etc., etc. So it was, I think, Ludwig, it's very varied and dependent on the project and what is required of that project. But I think it's about hearing, it's about listening and hearing about people's concerns, interests, like what they want to kind of get out of it, and working with that and making offerings and discussing. Yeah.
Thanks, Kate. Right. I think, Kate, as a concluding remark from my side, I wanted to thank you wholeheartedly from Wits' side for your time and effort and your ongoing participation in our training education, and we hope to see you soon again.
Thank you.
We will have a session with the students on their own again afterwards. And thanks for also agreeing to that. And yes, and yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, we did very much. I think just as a final announcement, I think the next, our 9th lecture is next week, Monday, same time. It's going to be done by Earthworld. We start at 10 again sharp, and we're also looking forward to that. Yes, until then, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Pleasure. Who was that?
I don't know.